Hello, and welcome back to Random Vids. So today, as the title says, I'm going to be talking about some more movie genres. So about a month ago, I ended up talking about my top 10 favorite Disney movies of all time. And that video was fun to make. So I decided for today's video, I decided to talk about my top 10 favorite Pixar movies. Because in that list, I didn't talk about the Pixar movies because there is a lot of really good Pixar movies too, and I felt like I should separate them to give both genres their own chance. Because there is a lot of good in both, so I wanted to have the good Disney and the good Pixar. So, even though they are basically the same thing now, it's still, I still wanted to separate the genres for videos. But anywho, man, Pixar is a really good company, and they have really good movies. And out of all the companies, Pixar is probably the one that I've seen the most movies of. Like, there's been a few I haven't seen yet. Like, never seen Coco, never seen Brave, and some of those newer-ish ones. But for the most part, I've seen basically every single Pixar movie. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and let's get into my top 10 favorite Pixar movies. And at number 10, we have Finding Nemo. Oh, man, talk about a nostalgia movie. Oh, man, so Finding Nemo was created back in 2003. So it's actually before my time, but I still think it's nostalgic, even though I was born a year later. But basically, this story focuses on a fish named Marlin. He's a clownfish, and literally in the first, 2 minutes of the movie, he already lost his wife and his kids due to I don't even know what type of fish it is. Barracuda? I think it is. Barracuda attack, yeah. Basically, I guess, a barracuda comes and kills Marlin's wife and kids. Ouch. What a dark way to start off the first few minutes of this Pixar film. But it is shown that one of the eggs actually still remains. And this is who Marlin names Nemo. So, even though Marlin may seem like a very overprotective dad, this is why. He literally lost all of his kids and wife all at once. So, ouch. Along the way, he ends up losing Nemo, who ends up trying to do a dare to touch this boat. And he ends up touching it, but he can't swim back enough, or he doesn't have enough time to swim back because a diver comes and ends up taking him. So now Marlin has to travel across the sea to Sydney Sprint. Just kidding. Sydney, Australia, to try to save Nemo. And along the way, he meets our comedy relief character, Dory. Dory is honestly a really great character. She's a great sidekick to Marlin, and they're both funny to see together. And I love I love her personality of having short-term memory loss. And yeah, she's overall just a really likable character, and it's fun seeing her and Marlin travel together. And I love the two side plot stories, too. We cut to see Marlin and Dory trying to find Nemo, and then we cut to Nemo to see what's going on with him, where he ends up getting captured by a dentist and puts him in a fish tank with a bunch of other fish, which is pretty interesting. And basically throughout the whole movie, Nemo's trying to escape. As well as all the other fish that are in there. So the dentist is basically the bad guy of the movie. Meanwhile, Marlin and Dory encounter a bunch of different animals along the way, like obviously Bruce and his two shark friends. I don't even know what their names. I forget what their names are. The jellyfish, and of course the iconic turtles, being Crush, and obviously his son Squirt, who is extremely adorable, and even some crab, a bunch of side characters. It's really cool, though. I like their adventure. Now, yeah, it is 2003, so the graphics may not be the greatest, but honestly, I think these graphics look better than Incredibles 1, which was made a year later. There's a lot of funny things that happen in this movie, from the iconic Just Keep Swimming song that Dory sings to, I don't know. I just think it's overall a really great movie. Of course, they end up finding Nemo at the end. I don't want to spoil too much about the movie. I could talk about it forever. It's just overall a simple story, but it's done really well. It's your typical road trip story, but it's overall just a really, really great story. overall. And like I said, it's nostalgic, so that's obviously going to raise a few points. And the characters are really great too. I don't think there's really any character that I can think of that just annoys me. Maybe Darla, but that's probably the only character that I can think of. All the other characters are really great though. There's probably some that I don't like. I just can't think of any right now. But yeah, Finding Nemo, it's a classic. It's nostalgic. It's a great movie overall. So I'd give it top 10. With that, let's move on to number 9, which is Toy Story 3. So just recently, I've rewatched all the Toy Story movies just last year. I've rewatched all 4 of the Toy Story movies. And 2 out of the 4 of them is going to be on this list. And one of them, obviously, is Toy Story 3. Man, oh man, talk about a really great third movie to Toy Story. So, I remember watching this movie when it came out in the movie theater, and it starts off really interesting. That in Andy's mind, he's making up these stories with his toys, obviously. But this story is a little more sadder than the other 2 movies, and it's about Andy growing up and moving on. So, and the toys definitely feel that too, because they aren't being played with as much, and they even want to donate themselves to a daycare for kids. Unfortunately, they end up encountering a lot of problems there, like our main antagonist, Lotso Huggenbear, who's a pretty interesting villain. I love how he's supposed to be the cuddly yet deadly type of character, which is kind of interesting, and I like the way they ended up doing that. I like all the new toys that we get in this movie too. Woody accidentally ends up getting separated from the group and goes with a little girl named Bonnie. And Bonnie has her own toys, and they're all really interesting too. I don't remember all their names, obviously, because there's so many new toys in this episode, in this movie. But back to the toys. Now it's basically just like a giant boot camp now at Sunnyside. So they have to all try to escape and get back to Andy. This movie, once again, like Finding Nemo, is really nostalgic to me. Now, yeah, it did come out a little later, so it may not be quite as nostalgic, but I've still seen this movie so many times as a kid, and I loved it. I think it's a really, really great movie to kind of end things with the Toy Story franchise. And, oh, that's right, they have a 4th movie. And apparently there's a 5th movie, I heard, too. Man, Toy Story just doesn't stop. Okay, as long as they keep having good ideas, I'm fine with them making more Toy Stories. But don't, like, just keep making them just for funsies, or else you'll turn into something like Ice Age. Anywho, let's start with the main cast themselves. The main cast has a really great group of characters, between Woody and Buzz, and Jessie, Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, and this movie even has Barbie in it. And I love the scenes with her and Ken in it, because there's a lot of really funny moments. Rex is a great character. Jessie and Bullseye, obviously. Ham is great too. The aliens, obviously. And of course, probably my favorite character in Toy Story, Slinky. But as you know, I love cartoon dogs, even if they are toys. Slinky's just so lovably adorable. I especially love him in the first 2 movies where Woody is just like his best friend, and he acts like a normal dog and would do anything for Woody. So it's really cute scene, and I love how they kept that through the whole franchise. Unfortunately, we don't see too much of that in this movie, but it doesn't really bother me too much because we get to see a lot of really cool moments in this movie instead. So it doesn't feel like there's some filler moments of the movie to need to have some of those other scenes that I don't even know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of really cool moments. I love how, I don't even know what I was going to say. Obviously, there's a lot of dark moments in this movie, too. Like the end scene where we all think that the toys are going to actually catch on fire and die. But then, of course, the aliens come at the last minute and save them. Andy finds, I guess, an address then. An unknown address, obviously. It's the address to Bonnie that Woody wrote for Andy. So Andy takes all of his toys, including Woody, over to Bonnie, and we get some heartwarming moments then, and a last goodbye scene. You see, this is a perfect way to end the Toy Story franchise, because it just feels like a perfect ending. Yeah, it's sad, but everyone grows up, so it's just a great movie overall. And of course, the graphics are way better than the first two movies. And it's just overall a really good movie. And oh man, it's so nostalgic. This movie is great. There's a lot of great scenes in this movie, and it's just a great movie overall. It's not my favorite Pixar movie, and I don't think it's my favorite Toy Story movie of all time, but it's a really good one, and it definitely deserves top 10 for me. Now let's move to number 8, which is Cars. Out of the 3 movies, this one is definitely my favorite. Man, talk about another nostalgic movie. I guess I watched so much Pixar back then. It's crazy. But man, this movie is extremely nostalgic. It's one of those movies I used to watch all the time as a kid. So, what's the movie about? It stars this racer named Lightning McQueen, this racing car. He loves to race. Unfortunately, a accident ends up leading him into a almost kind of abandoned town called Radiator Springs, where it used to be busy, but no longer. So literally over one customer, everyone in this town will get super excited. Lightning McQueen ends up, I guess, being dumb, ends up destroying the road, and basically destroys parts of the town. So they make him repave the road. What I love about this movie is the character development we see in Lightning McQueen. He starts off as this greedy person who doesn't think about anybody but himself. He could care less what others have to think. It's all about him. But as the movie goes on, he starts caring more about other characters, mainly first starting with his best friend Mater, and slowly going to other characters like Sally, and so on and so forth. So I love seeing the character development we get in Lightning McQueen, where he starts appreciating other people opposed to just himself. So eventually, everyone ends up finding him at Radiator Springs and takes him back to the race. So, but at this point, Lightning McQueen isn't really the same character as he was when he was first led to Radiator Springs. He's grown to like these characters, and he doesn't want to leave them. But his friends ain't too far behind him, and they end up becoming his new pit crew, which is really cool to see, especially seeing Doc Hudson as the main person. I don't even know what you want to call it, the guy with the headphones. And then, with all that, Lightning McQueen ends up losing the race. Like, at first, he really wanted to win just to get a piston cup. But as the movie goes on, he starts caring less and less about it. He starts learning lessons, especially from Doc Hudson. So it's, once again, nice seeing Lightning McQueen have a lot of character development. And he ends up letting, I guess, our villain Chick Hicks win instead. Basically, the ending is just kind of like Disventure Camp Season 3, where the villain wins, and then it's proven that the villain has no friends, and the person that everyone hates gets character development, and he doesn't win, but he ends up winning friends, and the winner just wins money, but no friends. We've seen this story millions of times. No, I'm just kidding. I never thought of this being like Disventure Camp until I saw like this YouTube short about them being like, oh yeah, Disventure Camp Season 3 is just like the ending to Cars 1. I can see that now that I saw that, where Chicks is Rhea and Lightning McQueen is Jake. I can 100% see that. The only difference is Lightning McQueen is actually a likable character, and he's a great character. Heck, I like Chick Hicks better than Rhea, probably. So, yeah. That's another thing I like about this movie, is the characters. There's a lot of really great characters in this movie. From Lightning to his girlfriend Sally to his best friend Mater to Luigi and Guido to the sheriff to Doc. There's so many great characters in this movie that I can go on forever. There's not really one character that I dislike. The character who I'd probably dislike the most would probably be Chick Hicks, honestly, just because he's just your stereotypic bad guy. But that doesn't make him annoying. And heck, even characters like Mater, like I said, I think he's a great character. Now, I know people do have mixed opinions on Mater. Some people find him extremely annoying and ruined the sequel, while others don't mind him, like me. Now, yeah, he's probably one of my least favorite characters, but I don't think he's a bad character, per se. What's also kind of funny is the character Ramon has the same voice actor who voiced Tito in Oliver and Company, one of my absolute favorite Disney movies of all time. Overall, the story might be simple. It may be kind of odd seeing
cars randomly drive around and talk. But hey, it's either this or planes. That's what I thought. Anywho, let's move to number 7, which is Incredibles 2. Man, oh man, talk about a great sequel to the original. Honestly, I know when I was young, I really did not like the original movie. I just thought the first half was just a lot of filler, a lot of meandering around with some very graphics, whereas the second half actually had the interesting action parts. Now, back when I was a kid, I could care less about the story, and I was just interested about the action packs. Nowadays, I'm more interested in both, so it's nice seeing the story. So, I've grown to like Incredibles 1. I think Incredibles 1 is a great movie. Or, okay, I don't even think it's still great. I think it's fine overall. But man, Incredibles 2 takes everything that I disliked about the original and flips it on its head. For starters, the graphics look a lot better, and the story doesn't play around like the original. The original, I will agree, it does kind of meander along a little bit in the first half, but in this one, no, you jump straight to action. So, for this sequel, it has been a minute since I've seen it, so forgive me if I'm forgetting something, but the Parr family has to go in hiding because superheroes are now, I guess, banned. Well, I guess they were already in hiding in the original, but they still have to be in hiding now. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. So our villain of the movie, Screenslaver, ends up turning these screens into, like, hallucinations to hypnotize people, and they start doing whatever Screenslaver says. And man, Screenslaver is dark. But she is a good villain. And it's kind of interesting seeing our surprise villain, which I'm pretty sure it was either Winston or Helen. I think that's what their names are. Winston and Helen? Am I correct? What are their names? The brother-sister, basically. And I love the surprise villain twist, and I was like, okay, it's either him or it's her that are going to be Screenslaver, and it was the sister, and I was like, okay, wow, that's actually a pretty good, interesting villain twist. Now, I know, they like to do a lot of these villain twists, like surprise villains, but I personally don't mind them if they're done right, and if they're done well. And, like I said, I love the scenes way better in this movie, and even the new characters, too, that we get introduced to. They're all really interesting. And the story overall is just way more interesting in my opinion, too. I feel like characters like, what's-his-face, the villain from the original movie, is way too overrated. Where, yeah, he's a good villain, but, Syndrome, that's his name. He doesn't come from one of my favorite movies ever, and I just feel like he's always at everyone's favorite. But man, Incredibles 2, I think it's done just way better. I love the side stories, too, where once again, we have two plots going on. We start with Elastigirl's side, Mrs. Incredible, Helen, whatever her name is. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. And she's going to be our main superhero in this movie, which is really cool. And they did a really good job of it. Whereas Bob, aka Mr. Incredible, has to stay at home and watch the kids, which leads to a lot of hilarious scenes between dealing with Violet and her teenage years, and then Dash with his homework, and even finding out about Jack's new superpowers. It's hilarious. And of course, they snuck in an Edna Mode scene in the movie, and she's hilarious. She's our comedy relief character of this movie, and she is great. So yeah, this was made way in 2018, which is a lot later than the original, but overall, it's a really great movie, and it's one of my favorite Pixar movies. I was a little mid at first when I found out they were making a sequel, but when I watched it, I was really glad that it ended up turning out really good, and I was really happy with what they ended up coming up with. It's overall way better story, way better plot, better villain, and just overall way better than the original. Better drama. So yeah, Incredibles 2 definitely makes it on my top 10 list. Let's get to number 6, which is Inside Out. Oh man, this is another really great Pixar movie. Now, it isn't quite as nostalgic as the other, as like the first three I talked about, but the story is just really good. So, this movie stars a girl named Riley, and for Riley we have these 5 emotions. joy, fear, anger, sadness, and disgust. All five being really great characters and just having their own goofy comedy moments. And they're just all really great and they're all really fun to watch. So Joy ends up becoming a little bit of a screen hogger and wants to take all the I don't even know what you want to call it, but she basically she discludes sadness a lot, and even some of the other characters. But as the movie goes on, she learns that sadness is just as important as she is. Sadness and joy end up accidentally going into, I don't even know what it's called, but outside headquarters, and they have to try to make their way back. Riley's, what they like to call core memories, are with them, and they have to try to get them back to headquarters so Riley can remember the most important things that she likes: friendships and hockey, even goofiness, and of course family, etc. So it's really interesting the way they did this movie, and I love seeing the character development we get, not just between joy, but joy and sadness, both together. And of course they meet Bing Bong, who is a hilarious, who's our comedy relief character basically. But they've done him quite well, where he wants to get back to headquarters so Riley can remember him. But as time goes on, he ends up realizing that Riley is growing up now and doesn't remember him, and that's okay. Unfortunately, Joey and Bing Bong get stuck down into the dump, and they have to get their way back out, or they'll be forgotten about forever. So Bing Bong ends up sacrificing himself to let Joy be able to live. So yeah, we do have a character death, so we can say goodbye to Bing Bong. It was handled perfectly well. Like I love the way they did this. And of course they end up fixing Riley at the end, and it's just a great movie. It's interesting seeing anger, fear, and disgust try to work together in Riley's mind, and then eventually put an idea in her head, and they can't use their emotions anymore, and okay, this movie just took a turn for the dark side. But it's okay. It ends up getting resolved at the end. And it's just a great movie overall, and 9 years later, we get a sequel, so I really like the sequel too. I just recently rewatched that movie as well. But I don't know, there's just something about the original that is just a little better, I think. Inside Out 2 is really good, don't get me wrong. But Inside Out, there's just something about the original that I just love so much more. I don't know what it is. I feel like Inside Out 2 just feels a little more rushed, which that's not bad. It just feels like the movie starts and ends really quickly. Which ain't bad. That just means they put a lot of things in it that make it interesting. The original, I shouldn't say meanders along, but I feel like has more of a perfect pace timing. The remake, or the sequel, feels a little rushed, or it just feels like it starts and ends really quick. But both movies are really, really great. And they did a really good job with both. So yeah, Inside Out definitely makes top 10. Let's get to number 5, which is Ratatouille. Man, a rat cooking could be this good? I think it is, at least. So, once again, it has been a while since I've seen Ratatouille, but this movie is just so good. So, it stars a rat named Remy, who doesn't really fit in, and he loves to cook. And he loves everything about cooking. I swear, you can't watch this movie without having food near you. Okay, unless you get disgusted about rats cooking, but it doesn't bother me, and I think it's done really well. I just get hungry watching this movie, especially when we get to the scenes with Remy in the kitchen trying to learn how to cook. There's just so many just yummy things in there that I just want to eat. So, I don't remember everyone's names, so forgive me, but we have our main character, Linguini, who is a new chef there trying to, I guess, fit in. And he wants to be, I guess, a chef as well. And he ends up bumping into Remy, and they both end up making a deal where they both basically cook. Because Linguini doesn't really know how to cook, and Remy does. So Remy hides in Linguini's hat, and basically tugs at his hair to make him move around, which is really hilarious. It leads to a bunch of hilarious moments. Um, and then, of course, our main villain, Chef Skinner, who is a hilarious villain, by the way. The fact that he's just really small and just hilarious. Anyway, so Linguini ends up taking over Chef Skinner and becomes like head manager there, head chef. So everyone then wants to learn, what's your secret? What's your secret? Like, he was just originally a garbage boy, and now all of a sudden he's cooking all these great meals. He ends up revealing his secret as time goes on, and I don't remember too much about this movie. It's been a while since I've seen it, but woo, talk about a good movie, man. So there's a lot of great moments in it. Like, I love Linguini and I don't forget her name, but the female chef of the kitchen, and both of their friendship growing into a relationship. Remy and all of his rat friends are great too. Although, if I had to pick a least favorite character, it'd probably be Remy's dad, just because he has nothing except for the "you don't fit in, son, you gotta do what I say" usual. We've seen this millions of times, right? Little Mermaid, Moana. So, overall, this is a really great movie, and it makes me hungry. It isn't anything too, like, the story isn't anything too much, but it's just overall a really great movie, and it definitely makes me hungry. And it makes you wonder why they end up building a ride in Epcot, right? This is a really great movie, and it definitely makes top 5. So now let's get to number 4, which is WALL-E. Man, oh man, this one's another really great nostalgic movie. So I love how the first little bit of WALL-E opens up with them singing "Put On Your Sunday Clothes" from the movie Hello Dolly, one of my absolute favorite musical movies of all time. And what a great way to open up WALL-E. And they even play another song from Hello Dolly later on. I forget what it's called. One sec. It Only Takes a Moment. That's what the song is called. So they play that somewhere in the beginning of the movie as well. So the story is based off of WALL-E, who is a robot, and he's all lonely. And he wants some friends, or even a girlfriend. So he ends up finding this female robot named Eve. And he constantly is stalking her and is just curious on, like, hey, what's going on? Because Wally's used to being all alone. So the two end up bonding, but then it's time for Eve to return to her ship. So Wally tries to follow her into her ship, and that's where we see where all the humans went, and they all have gotten, what's the word, and how do I be nice about it? We'll just say they've become very lazy as the years went on. So they rely on their chairs to get them everywhere and even help them do things. It's funny. It's something. It's just fun seeing Wally and Eve together, and the story just gets better as it goes on, and it's really interesting. It's just a really interesting movie. You get to see Captain, who is basically our main human, the captain of the ship. Eventually, they end up learning about how great life on Earth is when they find this little plant that Wally finds on Earth. So, eventually, they end up defeating our the villain named Otto, and they end up going back to Earth. And it's just a great movie overall. Unfortunately, Wally almost dies. Literally. He almost gets crushed by Otto. He almost dies twice, actually, in fact. That's kind of a dark moment. Never mind. Double dark moment. But luckily, Eve saves him, and it turns out really great. It's just a really good movie overall, and it has great music. Oh, it's because it's from Hello Dolly, one of my favorite movies, and they chose some really good songs from it, too. So, yeah, WALL-E is really good. I'd give it top 5 for sure. So let's move on to number 3, which is Up. I know, right? This movie is up at the top 3. And boy, oh boy, this movie is a classic. Now, I haven't seen it too much as a kid, but as time goes on, I've seen this movie more and more, and I've grown to love it a lot. So the movie stars this old man named Carl, who recently lost his wife named Ellie. And what's a shame is we don't really get to see much of Carl and Ellie's relationship. I mean, they have a really great relationship, but Ellie unfortunately dies in still the beginning of the movie. So now we're focused more on Carl and his lonely life. in his life being alone in his house, is what I'm trying to say. He ends up meeting a kid named Russell, who's trying to help him to get a badge for his Boy Scout thing. And Carl has no interest. And from a little accident, ends up basically getting forced to go to Shady Oaks, which is a retirement home. But Carl has a trick up his sleeve, and he ends up literally making his house fly with a bunch of different balloons, which is really interesting. Apparently, Russell ends up on board as well, even though we don't ever see him in any shots. But, okay. He ends up joining Carl on this adventure. So, basically, from there, the story just becomes one giant road trip story. But it's a really interesting one, too, because Carl and Russell are just great characters. This movie almost kind of reminds me of the first Pup Star movie. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically a movie Airbud Entertainment made, focused on this young pup named Tiny, where she goes on an adventure to get back home with this older dog named Charlie. Kind of the same thing like this. Young boy, old man, going on an adventure. Maybe that's why I like the first Pup Star so much, is because it's a lot like Up. Or it's because it focuses on Tiny, who's just a great character overall. As this movie goes on, we get to see more characters. Like, for starters, we get to see Kevin, who's this very rare bird that our villain is after. And, of course, the character who steals this movie for sure, Doug. A cartoon dog, of course. I love Doug. He's easily one of my favorite Pixar characters of all time. He's just a great, lovable ball of joy. And he's a great, even comedy relief character, comedic character as well. And I love his friendship with Russell and Carl. And it's funny, and that's how, like, the spin-offs are basically a lot of just Doug center of attention, because he's a great character. Everyone loves him. I really hope we get a sequel eventually, because this movie is just so good, and I want to see a sequel, or at least maybe a sequel on Carl and Doug's life. It would be kind of interesting. So Carl has one thing and one thing only. He wants to get to Paradise Falls and drop his house there and just basically stay there till he dies. But then he realizes that that's really no better than where he's at. He made it there, and that's it. And now he's cared a lot more for his other friends, Russell and Kevin and, of course, Doug. So at some point we end up meeting our villain named Charles Muntz, who is after Kevin. And Carl and Russell soon learn that and try to escape him. But Muntz ends up finding them and takes Kevin. So now Carl and Russell have to go and save Kevin. Doug, we then find out, originates from Muntz. But I guess he was kind of the runt of the litter. Or he was the runt. So he ended up being really nice instead of really mean. I guess, whatever. I like all the dogs in this movie too. Like, they're all really funny. Obviously, Doug is the best. And it's funny how after they defeat Alpha, or Doug defeats Alpha, he ends up becoming the new Alpha, or the new captain of the dogs, whatever you want to call it. Which is kind of interesting. Which I love that little plot story of them all. Doug is a great character. Easily top 10 favorite Pixar characters of all time. Anywho, moving on. Carl ends up, I guess, keeping the house at Paradise Falls like he promised, but going back to civilization, which he realized that he was holding on to too much and had to let some go. This is a really great movie, and it's a lot. Like, it's a big story, but that's what I really like about it. Not every Pixar movie, or every movie in general, has to be cupcakes and rainbows. Like, they can have some serious moments. And it starts off with Ellie dying, so it shows it's going to be a pretty serious and even maybe a sad movie, which a lot of people say, top 10 saddest scenes of all time, Ellie's death. Yes, it's definitely a sad scene, but at least they got to enjoy their life together, and, like, she didn't die, like, the moment they got married or something. It's definitely a sad movie, but it's a really great movie overall. Definitely top 3 best Pixar movies of all time. So with that, let's move on to number 2, which is Toy Story 2. Oh man, talk about a great sequel to the original. So what's funny is that back when I was a little kid, I could probably call this the absolute worst movie out of the Toy Story franchise. But as I've grown older, I thought this movie is just way. I think this movie is way better than I first thought. So, in this movie, Woody gets captured by our villain, Owl, the chicken or whatever. Okay. We actually have a really funny villain, Owl, who is just hilarious. So, a few of the toys have to go and save Woody, who end up being Buzz, Mr. Potato Head, Ham, Rex, and Slinky. Okay, that's a great group. And what I like is we still get to see the original characters from the first movie that aren't in some other movies, but we also see some of the new characters too. Like, we still have Bo Peep in this movie, but this also introduces new characters, like, of course, Jessie and Bullseye and Stinky Pete, who ends up being our main villain of the movie, who is who is one of the first cases and scenarios that we get a surprise villain. So I'm trying to think where to start with this movie. There's so much. Woody accidentally gets his arm ripped by Andy playing a little too roughly, so he ends up being on the shelf. So I'm trying to think how. Oh yeah. Then Wheezy, who's this penguin, accidentally ends up going to a yard sale. That's why Woody goes out to try to save Wheezy, but instead this guy named Owl takes Woody away. I can't take Owl seriously. He's just hilarious. Anywho, so Woody ends up meeting Jessie, Bullseye, and Stinky Pete, and they all have their little adventures, and they talk about how Woody was part of, like, this gang or whatever, and then they soon learn about Jessie's past and how she used to be the favorite toy, and then all of a sudden, like, they ended up abandoning her, which is another one of those sad Pixar moments. Now, honestly, I think the reason why I didn't like this movie much as a kid is for those scenes alone. A lot of the scenes in Owl's apartment get very old and boring, and they don't really do too much except meander along. Now, I do think some scenes of it are really interesting when I start actually paying more attention to the actual story itself. It's good, but honestly, I think the best scenes of this movie are the side characters and their plot. I love seeing Buzz, Rex, Mr. Potato Head, Slinky, and Ham just on their own adventure to try to find Woody, and that is what makes this movie really good. I love their side adventure of trying to save Woody, and it's so funny. Any moment they're all on screen, and it's way better than the original movie where they all just hated Woody. I've seen that type of plot just gets very old. The "we think you did it, therefore we're all gonna hate you" type of plot. Those type of plots get annoying, but at least this movie shows they actually all care for Woody and want to go after him and try to save him. Buzz, obviously Woody's best friend, Rex, who is hilarious, Mr. Potato Head, who has this obviously funny moments, the same with Ham, and of course Slinky being my absolute favorite character of the movies, of course wants to find his buddy Woody. There's a lot of funny scenes like them in the Owl's toy shop scene, and there's a bunch of Barbie dolls. That scene was hilarious. Or Buzz fighting Buzz. There's just so many great things about this movie which really push it above all the other ones and even make it my favorite. And then, of course, when they all actually save Woody, but Woody doesn't want to go. But eventually changes his mind and goes, and that's when we learn that Stinky Pete is actually the villain. So it's kind of funny seeing them all interact with each other at first, and when Woody is like, "Hey, no, like, I actually want to stay here with these guys," then they're all sad, and of course, poor Slinky doesn't know what he's going to do with himself without his best friend. It's just such a, I shouldn't say it's a sad scene, but it's like, it's a great scene. It's a good scene of the movie. Owl comes in and basically moves them all away, because Owl's moving away. I don't even know what this guy is anymore, but basically Stinky Pete wants them all to travel together, and if they bail, then Stinky Pete will rip them apart. But they end up defeating him, and they all get to go back home, and Andy has new toys. It's a really good movie. Not as nostalgic as the third movie to me, but after rewatching this movie last year, it's just this movie's grown on me so much, and I think it's overall a really good movie. Now, yeah, Wheezy singing the "You've Got in Front of Me" at the end is kind of meh, because I do think that song is a little overplayed and isn't quite my favorite song. It's nostalgic, it's a classic, but that's about all I have to call it. It is also kind of annoying too. But yeah, the scenes in Al's apartment are kind of eh. But what I love is the side character quest that we get to see in this movie. It's kind of like Emperor's New Groove in a way, where I just love seeing the side characters more than our main characters. But it's still a really good movie, and I've grown to like it a lot. So before we get to number one, let's talk about a few honorable mentions. A Bug's Life. Yeah, this is one of the first Pixar movies ever made, and yeah, it might be one of the more movies and might have not maybe the greatest graphics ever, but I can't help it. This movie is just so nostalgic to me. I used to watch it a lot as a kid. I used to watch so many Pixar movies as a kid. Basically, it stars Flick the Ant, who wants to defend everyone from the grasshoppers. So he ends up getting a bunch of circus bugs and pretends that they actually are warriors, but they aren't. So that fails, and Flick has to go away. But when the grasshoppers actually do come, they have a backup plan, aka the bird. Birds eat bugs. So, which actually leads to the real bird coming and basically killing off Hopper. The story is nothing too complex or anything, but this movie is just so nostalgic, and the characters are really great too. I especially love all the young ants. Inside Out 2. 9 years later, and we finally get a new Inside Out movie, and it's just as great as the original. Although, like I said, I think the original may be a little better because this movie does feel a little more rushed. But I still think it's a really great movie. I love the new emotions we get: anxiety, ennui, envy, and of course embarrassment. All four really great emotions. And it's funny seeing. It's cool. It's interesting seeing them transition Riley into having puberty. So now she gets all these new emotions, and it's just a great movie overall. It's jam-packed with fun, with a bunch of great moments. Like, instead of them focusing on core memories, now they're focused more on beliefs. So we constantly hear beliefs like, I'm a good person, or like, I'm not good enough, or more. And I love the back of the mind jokes, and there's just a lot of great new jokes. So instead of just being joy and sadness going into the Beyond HQ, now everyone is. All of our main characters. There's a lot of funny scenes. I love the tribute to Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, where they have to call Pouchy out, which is hilarious. It's a tribute to the Mickey Mouse gang calling Toodles, which is another one of those classic movies or classic shows I used to watch all the time as a kid. But yeah, this movie is a great sequel to the original, and even though it's not top 10, it definitely deserves honorable mentions. Finding Dory. So, almost kind of like Cars 2, this is another one of those cases where our comedy relief character becomes the main character. The only difference is that for Cars 2, only some people liked Mater. Mater definitely is a big screen hog in the sequel, and definitely isn't really deserving of a main character in my opinion. And I'm sure a lot of other people can agree, where he can be likable, but is no one's favorite. And some people downright just hate him and find him obnoxious. Although Dory, on the other hand, actually feels like she has some more story to herself, especially since she has short-term memory loss, and she is overall a more beloved character than Mater is. So it makes more sense having her be the main character, especially since Marlin's story already kind of got finished up in the original. So for Finding Dory, Dory tries to find her parents that she's lost a long time ago, and she tries to remember. We meet, obviously, basically all the original characters, and I love the scene that we get to see with Crush and Squirt and all those characters again. And we get some new characters too, like, oh my gosh, what is her name? Destiny, the whale. That's what I was thinking of. Destiny and Bailey, the beluga. And they're both really great characters, and they're both hilarious. And of course, Hank the octopus, who is also a hilarious character. And there's so many just great moments in this movie. Now, I don't think it's quite as good as the original, due to the original being a little more nostalgic and me enjoying it a little more, but I do think the sequel is a great sequel to the Finding Nemo franchise. Should they add a third one? I don't know. That's up to Pixar, I guess, but I would be fine if this would be the last, like, movie from this franchise, because they did a good job and it ends really good, too. Overall, it's a great sequel to Finding Nemo, and I enjoyed it almost as much as I did Finding Nemo. Onward. So, this movie I've only seen like one time, and it was a decent time ago, so I don't really remember too much about it, except for the fact that I liked it. It's basically two brothers trying to create some sort of magic spell for them to hang out with their dad for like 24 hours, I think it is, or something. And they only end up creating half of him, so it's just basically his legs. But then as time goes on, as we get to the end of the movie, they end up creating the rest of him, and then he disappears. I don't really remember this movie too much, since, like I said, I've only seen it one time. But it's overall a decent movie. I don't remember, like I said, don't remember too much about it, but I just remember liking it, so nothing else I really have to say. Good movie. Luca. Oh man, I feel like if this was one of those movies that I've seen that came out like 10 years prior, this would probably be one of those movies that I would watch over and over again. Unfortunately though, I've still only seen this movie one time, but like Onward, I really enjoyed it. In fact, I probably enjoyed it a little more than Onward. Once again, I don't really remember too much that happens, except for our main character Luca, who is a sea creature, but ends up turning into a human when out of the water. He ends up meeting a friend named Antonio, who is the same way. I think his name is Antonio. So on land, they end up meeting this girl and her dad, and they basically stay with them because they want to learn what it's like above the water. Meanwhile, Luca's parents have their own side story trying to find Luca. I remember Luca's parents being funny, and they kind of stole the movie, but at the same time, Luca and his story was really interesting too. So, and I thought the villain was decent too. Yeah, he was your stereotypic bully bad guy, but I didn't mind him. And I don't remember this movie much, though. I really do want to rewatch it again. Once again, I feel like if this was a movie that came out maybe 10 years, even 5 years prior, I'd probably watch it like a lot more. So it's a good movie, but unfortunately, I just don't remember much of it, so I'd only have to give it honorable mentions. But this would probably be number 11. So with that, let's get to my favorite Pixar movie of all time, and that is Monsters, Inc. Oh man, talk about a good movie. What's funny is that I haven't seen this movie until like just recently. Back in like, I want to say 2022 is probably the first time that I've seen, no, 2021 I think is the first time I've ever seen this movie. Wow, I know, I can't believe it either. And this movie came out in, what, 2001? And it took me till 2021 to finally watch the movie. I have seen Monsters University, which came out in 2013, thinking it was a pretty okay movie, a pretty decent movie overall. But I never watched the original, and man, when you watch the original opposed to the sequel or prequel, whatever you want to call it, there's just no contest. This movie is just so much better in every way, shape, and form. Except for graphics, of course. For it being a 2001 movie, it does lack a little in graphics. But, hey, it doesn't bother me that much. So, in this movie, we have our main characters, Mike and Sully, who are best friends working at Monsters Incorporation. Basically, they scare kids, and that powers energy in their city. So in one accident, a little girl ends up sneaking out of the rooms, and Sully ends up calling her Boo. She ends up forming a bond with Sully, and they are meant to think that this girl has, like, I don't even know what they want to, but, like, monsters are just as much afraid of kids as kids are as monsters, which makes it really funny. Anytime Boo goes around scaring everyone and they just run. So, Mike has a girlfriend named Celia, I think her name. Yes, Celia. and they go on a date together, and Sully accidentally lets Boo into the restaurant, and that goes all haywire. So they have to hide Boo at their apartment, and they try to get her back, but it leads to a bunch of hilarious situations the next day at work. One of my absolute favorite characters in this movie is Roz. Roz is hilarious. Even though she's not in the movie too much, just her appearances are just hilarious, and all of her interactions with all the characters. She's just a funny, goofy character. And I love how down to earth a lot of these characters are. It just seems like a normal day going to work for some of these characters. And of course, the main boss, Mr. Waternoose, who really cares about his company and wants to pass it down to Sullivan. But as the movie goes on, it's revealed that he is our actual main villain of the movie, along with, of course, Randall, of course. Which Randall, we already kind of knew he was the main villain, kind of like a half bully too, but we didn't know Waternoose was also working with him. So once they find that out, they end up banishing Randall to just a random area, and Waternoose obviously goes to prison. Obviously, there's a lot of great moments. I love the whole chaos mode in like the middle of the movie, where they're trying to find Boo because Boo wandered off at their work, so they have to try to find her. So that leads to a bunch of hilarious moments, like Sully thinking that she got crushed, and he's carrying a cube of garbage, to Mike Wazowski just trying to, I don't even know what he's trying to do, and then Boo doing her own thing, ending up with a group of kids. Randall trying to find them both. It's just a hilarious scene. I love the unhinged moments of the middle of this movie, and the storytelling in this movie is really good too. Yeah, it's a little sad when they end up shredding Boo's door because due to safety of having her back. So Sully has to say one last goodbye to her, which leads to obviously another sad moment in Pixar. But at the end of the movie, they end up putting the door back together, and Sully visits Boo again. So it's just a great ending to just a great movie. And what's kind of interesting is now instead of them scaring the kids, they end up trying to make the kids laugh. Who wants to laugh in the middle of the night? Well, I guess kids do, apparently. And that makes the power just even more stronger than scaring them. This is just such a great movie overall. I could talk about this movie over and over, and I've only seen it like 3 times. It's not a nostalgic movie. I haven't seen it so many times. I haven't seen it when I just recently watched this movie, and I had to watch it, and I wanted to watch it again because of how great this movie really is. And it really is a really good movie, and I think it's way better than Monsters University, which is just okay overall. It's fine, but it's nothing like Monsters, Inc. This movie is great. All the characters are so down to earth. You feel like you're really connecting with these characters, even though they are monsters. So it's kind of weird saying that, but at the same time, it's like, it just feels like you're right there with them, waking up, going to work, doing your usual thing at work, going home, going on dates, having the grouchy coworker, aka Ross. So there's a lot of great things about this movie, and in my opinion, I can consider it my absolute favorite Pixar movie, and it probably will always be my favorite Pixar movie of all time. Woo! That was a long list, but that was fun. It's fun talking about movies. I definitely do want to do other genres in the future, but for today, I definitely wanted to talk about Pixar movies. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So have a good day.